KDKA-TV.
So glad you're spending part of your Sunday with us here on the Sunday Business page. In 2006, let's take you back to that point because that's where it started. Pittsburgh Mayor then Luke Ravenstahl and then Superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools Mark Roosevelt announced the creation of a scholarship initiative, and he called it the Pittsburgh Promise. Since then, more than 8,000 students have received scholarship dollars. More than $111 million in scholarship funds have been given away. Pittsburgh Promise has changed the lives of many who otherwise would not have been able to afford college. But just last month, the Promise Scholarship Program announced that it was reducing the largest award that goes to qualified students. It will be reduced to $5,000, down from $7,500. Why make that decision? And what exactly does it mean for the future of the Pittsburgh Promise? Well, we are pleased to be able to get the answers from Saleem Ghubril. He's back in the Sunday Business page, the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Promise. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Rick. It's good to be with you.
Glad that you're here. First of all, I think right off the bat, people say, wait a second, what's going on? Are they in trouble? Why 75 down to 5,000? Why take away money from our kids? It's only getting more expensive to go to college, so why not give them more money?
Boy, these are such great questions, and the answer for them is that we are not giving less money. We are actually giving more money, and I know that requires explanation.
Okay, so how is that possible?
So the scholarship maximum, by the way, was $5,000 when we first started for the first 4 years. Then we doubled it to $10,000 for the next 4 years. Then we announced that we are splitting the difference and meeting in the middle at $7,500.
So 2006 to 2010, basically, it was $5,000.
Through 2011.
And then it bumped up to the 10,000, and now it's sort of back at the original level.
So 2 years ago, we made a major announcement. Now, that was a reduction in the actual scholarship, and that was when we were convinced that we could not really sustain the level of spending that we were on, which was $18 to $20 million a year on scholarships. We could not sustain that for a long enough period of time to include every kid who was then in Pittsburgh Public Schools going back to kindergarten.
Okay.
And that's the class of 2028. So we made the reduction from $10 to $7,500 a year for sustainability reasons. The announcement that we made this week is not about sustainability, but it's truly about equity and about clarity.
How so?
And this is how that works. When the scholarship was $7,500 and we weren't paying for room and board and books, it was a tuition-only scholarship, the average scholarship was only $3,300. So the maximum was $7,500, but because of the sliding scale that says if you started in the Pittsburgh Public Schools at this time you get that much, that time you get less.
So if you were K through 12, you would get more money than someone who moved here in 6th grade and was just educated for those final 7 years.
And that was only one factor. So the sliding scale was one factor. Another factor was the money could only be used for tuition and fees. So if you already have scholarships for tuition and fees, then you don't get any money from us. And when we looked at the data, once we rolled out that change, it became abundantly clear to us that that change was hurting our lowest income kids, our first generation college goers, and our black and brown kids the most.
So if a young person ends up getting a full ride to go to Robert Morris, they can still get a scholarship from the Pittsburgh Promise that would help them cover room and board and or books that may not be covered as a grant from the school.
So by eliminating the sliding scale and by including room, board, and books, the average scholarship goes to over $4,200. And the only reason it's $4,200, not $5,000, is going to be because some kids will end up needing less by going, for example, to a less expensive school. And so now we are able to look a kid in the face and look mom in the face and look the financial aid officer who's trying to package a financial aid deal in the face and say to them, this kid is getting $5,000 from the Pittsburgh Promise unless he or she needs less than $5,000. So really we increase the scholarship and we increase the fundraising burden that we have to bring about from $250 million goal to $265 million goals.
So it means in the bottom line then you're adding $15 million in terms of keeping it sustainable for that class of 2028.
And exactly, and giving each kid up until through the class of 2028 more money per year until they graduate.
What can be done? Because we had a discussion on another program here on a Sunday morning a couple weeks ago. What can be done about the out of control rate of increases for college education in general? I realize that's not your problem, but it is something that you're in that world and that you deal with. What can be done? Parents are terrified of how they're going to be able to pay for school.
The cost of higher education in this country is absolutely ridiculous, and Pennsylvania, in terms of funding higher education, is third from the bottom.
Now, you're not from this country originally. How different is it where you grew up? Is it different in the rest of the world than what we're seeing here in the U.S.?
It's different in lots of the rest. Now, my country is not, while we have a higher education system, it's largely a private system. There's not a public system for higher education there, so it's expensive there too. Right. But in the majority of the developing world that recognizes the importance of education and the relationship of education to actual employment and productivity in the marketplace, higher education is funded very differently all over the world, all over the developed world, than it is here in the U.S. And in Pennsylvania, like I said, we are doing a terrible job from a policy perspective funding higher education.
I think you said last week it was 49th out of 50 states.
47th out of 50.
Thank you. Right, and it just gives you an idea of where Pennsylvania is right now. So moving forward, if you look at the success you've had in the past, the number of students who were able to not only go to college, but the 10% bump in the students' graduation rate from 58% to 68%, are those the benchmarks that you look at and say, we need to keep pushing forward for these reasons?
Forgive me for correcting just one data point. That jump from 58 to 68% is actually in college going.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
The high school graduation rates in Pittsburgh public schools since the inception of the Promise went from 68% of our kids to 80% of our kids are now finishing high school. That's not good enough. Our goal is to be no less than 95% of a graduation rate. We are there at 4 or 5 of our schools, but not in all of our schools. So we've seen high school graduation rates go up, college going rates go up, college completion rates go up. Our kids are going and staying and completing their higher education at rates that are significantly higher than the rest of the country and the rest of the state. Very proud of the performance of our kids. They are Pittsburgh's promise, and we are just delighted to remove barriers out of their way to make that outcome possible.
Are you confident with these changes that sustainability is real?
Well, the sustainability we addressed, like I said 2 years ago, what we just did is we made it equitable and we made it clearer. I am very hopeful to say I'm absolutely confident would be a bit arrogant. I am very hopeful that not only this decision is the right decision, but that our ability to raise the remaining $65 million. We raised $200 million in the first decade. Now we need another $65 million in the second decade. How much do you have on you, Rick?
Not that much. nowhere near that much. But I wish you the best of luck as you continue, and thank you for what you do for Pittsburgh's youth.
Thank you,
as
sir.
They continue to be educated.
Good to see you today.
Saleem Ghubril, thank you very much for being here. Things we get into and the things we learn on the Sunday Business Page. We will continue and take a look at the creation